cannot let you introduce yourself, because all I know is I would just say, hey, you're super badass, and you know everything, a lot more about non-performing notes.
She does.
Because you've been so deep in the industry, from the inside, from the outside, from every which way. So, and because there's a lot of noise in the industry, and I'm really pleased that you could be part of this event. So, without further ado, please come up and
try to cheer them up.
Yeah.
I started in banking in '95 because I didn't want to stay at home with my kids. I thought staying home with my children was like torture. I'm being honest, you guys. I'm just telling the truth. So I said to my husband, I said, hey, if I get a job and I do everything that I'm supposed to do at home, can I work? And he said, as long as nothing is neglected at home. So I went into a job in banking, probably making 40% less than my peers, because I didn't have the experience and I didn't have a college degree. But what I did have is I had drive and I had ambition. Went into small business banking at National City Bank, and my boss loved me, and I started running circles around people in the industry where my coworkers was like, could you kind of slow down because you're making us look bad? And I started doing all this outside the box thinking. I was the first person who sold loans on eBay, non-performing loans that were charged off from the bank, and made a fortune. That was probably before all the regulators came into play. Can't do that today. They probably shut the bank down. Fast forward probably to 2000, I would say 99 to 2000. There was a guy from Pennsylvania started sending in faxes to our department wanting to buy a note, and his name was Brandon Yeager. And I was like, why does this guy keep sending me this thing about wanting to buy one note? And it was in Pennsylvania, and at that time, the bank didn't even foreclose in Pennsylvania because we felt like it was just a waste of money, time, and energy. So we didn't foreclose in Pennsylvania at all. And he kept sending in this request, and I kept putting it in the trash because it really wasn't anything that was appealing to me. But I decided to call Brandon one day because I didn't want to talk to any borrowers who hadn't paid their mortgage payment, just to kind of shoot the breeze, and didn't really know what I was doing. He was like, well, why can't you sell it? I was like, because we don't do that. So then I started asking questions around the department. I said, well, why don't we do that? They're like, well, some other department handles that. I said, but am I allowed to do it? And they said yes. So I called Mr. Yeager back, did a transaction with him, and I opened up the floodgates of a $10,000 a month transaction to doing about $500,000 to $1 million a month with his boss, which I didn't know at the time was his boss. It was just, I thought it was a business partner. And even in the sense of when I was selling those loans, as I stated, I started off selling first mortgages for about 10 cents on the dollar, and I was doing seconds for 3 or 4 cents on the dollar, is where I started. And I will still tell you guys, I was very ignorant about what I was doing. I had no idea that I was doing anything but benefiting myself financially for a bonus and getting rid of a bunch of stuff that we did not want at the bank, that we considered garbage. And I was on the streets being called somebody's golden goose egg inside the bank. And this individual that I was selling a lot of paper to was from New York, and he would always be so sweet on the phone. He was a charmer. He could probably talk your clothes off of you. He was so sweet. Yeah, no, he was that sweet. He didn't miss a birthday. He didn't miss a death in my family. He didn't miss anything. He was Johnny on the spot. And 2004, late 2004, 2005, things started changing in the industry where the market started picking up, and National Home Equity was created at National City Bank, where the charge-off department, it didn't matter how much money we were bringing in, Mortgages were booming, and we weren't so important anymore, and they started laying people off. The guy that I worked for, I remember the day that there were people that were let go, husbands and wives making six figures, and I was devastated. And I have a heart for people. And my boss said, if you go out there and you cry when you let anybody go, I'm going to fire you. He said, it might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, but I'm going to find an opportunity. I'm going to fire if you shed one tear. I did not have it in my heart to stand in front of my staff to reassure them that it was going to be okay, because I knew what was coming. It was an upcoming booming industry of creating mortgages that were going to fail. And I wasn't fired, but I was laid off eventually because I cried like a baby when I let those people go. And then I went to the origination side. I went to Nova Star Mortgage, and somebody by the name of, I won't call his name either, somebody from San Francisco heard that I had worked for National City Bank, and he wanted to buy a note. I had written the process on selling notes, which really wasn't such a great process, because I think that there could have been a lot more money made when I was selling off distressed notes. But I told him, I said, do this. I think I told him to offer $30,000 for a $200,000 note, and they were going to come back and they were going to counter about $36,000. He says, how do you know that? I said, because I did the process. And he was successful on buying that note, and he made about $200,000 or more off of his first note. I'm now working on the origination side, and he was like, well, let's buy more. Yes.
I'm just kind of fascinated that, because the economy back then was pretty darn good up until 2006, essentially, that your bank was selling that paper so cheap.
It was charged off. We didn't care. We had new paper to chase.
Yeah, that's just crazy, though. Like, because even in the downturn, it seems I wasn't buying notes, but they were getting it for maybe 30 cents on the dollar. But I don't know, it's just crazy.
Well, if you would settle with a borrower for 5% and you could get 10% from somebody else, it was still pretty sweet to us. I mean, that's the reality. It was properties that were not in great areas, because I didn't work for National City Mortgage. I worked for National City Bank, which was a separate entity who basically kind of did the garbage loans. We had option one doing refinances for us, probably about $500,000 to $1 million every single month on charged off stuff when you could borrow on CD paper. So again, sometimes it was easier just to sell it off than to go through the hassle of trying to get it refied through option one, who all the AEs were a pain in my ass. Sorry. They were. So that's kind of like what kind of threw me in. I say fools rush in. I was really a fool because I had no idea what I was doing. I learned a lot. I was ambitious. I made a lot of money. I was recovering. My department was recovering about $5 million a month in my division. I was a rock star. But when the origination turn started, it changed the business. It changed the industry, where charged off accounts really didn't matter anymore, because National Home Equity, they were bringing in billions of dollars on originating new loans. So that's how the market changed. But that's kind of how I got started. I wanted to share a little bit about me. And the reason I'm here today is that now working as a servicer, all I do is clean up people's messes all day long. I get tons and tons of emails on, Saprina, can you fix this? What would you do? And how would you fix it? So I feel like some people do things that they don't know any better until they know better. So I want to share a little bit about what we do, how we do it, and just give you some examples and some real case scenarios. So again, I'm Saprina Allen. Believe it or not, I'm not only just a mom, I'm a grandmother of 3, one more on the way. My oldest son is not in this picture because he's just as stubborn as his mother. My grandchildren are my joy. I am not working for me. I say now, I'm actually working very hard so I can leave them a legacy, and they can have the privilege of having things that I did not have growing up. And my grandson will say, because Nana said so. I also have another passion that I will share with you guys later on in my presentation. Who is Main Street? We are a note servicer, and one of my biggest things about servicing notes is I try my very best to make sure that we are compliant in every aspect of how we do business. I was just in California at an event where I was sitting with some CFPB regulators, and I said to them, I have a question. Why is a CFPB complaint a complaint as soon as a consumer files an issue that they're having with the lender? He was like, well, what else would you call it? Well, I would call it an inquiry and not a complaint, because what it does is it creates all types of panic. It induces panic with the lenders, with the originators, and the lender is not always wrong just because a consumer files a complaint. And I think that the CFPB has done a disservice to us as lenders by creating a CFPB complaint in the process. I don't think the process is fair, and I am actually working on trying to get things changed with how they do business and how they interact with lenders.
They shouldn't even be in business. The Federal Reserve funds them, and we all know where they come from, just FYI.
Well, I wanted to know. I said, well, who's regulating you?
Right. The Federal Reserve, the Bank of International Settlements, the Bank of Europe.
So we service in all 50 states. I am the president at Main Street Asset Solutions, and I have over 25 years of experience and results. And I will tell you that it's not been all good. It's the good, it's the bad, it's the ugly. People talk about all the success stories, but what they don't talk about is the devastation when people are losing their homes. And I think that there's a way that you can do that, make money, and let people walk away feeling like they're still people. And a lot of people don't do that in this industry. I feel like they're heartless. So why do I think you should use a servicer? There are some questions that I want to ask you. Do you feel like your emotions get caught up into your deals? And those emotions go high and low. When you're making money and the deals are great, everything is fine. But as soon as your deal starts to fall apart, what do? Your emotions take over. You're thinking about, this is my retirement money. This is money I planned on getting back within 12 months. And you can't control your emotions. But if you put someone in your place to actually do the servicing piece for you, I think you become more successful. And people disagree. I know people that service their own notes. I will tell you, before I started, I serviced my own notes. When I got into buying notes myself, I was servicing my own notes. And I will tell you, when it was money that I was counting on getting back, I got a little crazy because it was my money. And I can tell you that, and I can be transparent about that, because if I feel that way and you're funding deals, you have to feel that same way. You don't want to be up at night wondering if a borrower is going to answer the phone, whether they're going to answer the door when you go knock on their door to collect a check. One of the big things that I'm finding also, when you do seller finance deals, how tight is your original deal? What are you doing when you originate? Are you using a loan officer? Are you doing a 1003? Are you collecting income docs? What are you doing to set yourself up for success if that loan goes into default? Are you getting a canceled check? Just to make sure that you know where they're banking if you have to go all the way through with foreclosure and you might need to pursue a deficiency balance. What are you doing even on the origination side? You might have the greatest process in place, but when, again, your deal goes sour, did you think about all the things that could go wrong when the relationship is good? You don't. When it's warm and fuzzy and you feel good about that person, and people's businesses, they get in trouble, even if it's an investor. Are you protecting yourself in the investment when you go in? And, you know, the other thing is if you're using a servicer, we can do a lot of your heavy lifting for you. I don't do anything above, I think, $250 without getting permission from the investor. when I'm working on their file. There's just certain things that we will do that we have to get permission on. If we actually are going to move forward with foreclosure, I make sure that the investor approves that, and I try to do it in stages so you don't have to come out of pocket with a chunk of cash all at once. But we keep you informed by monthly reporting. You have a login to our portal. So again, I think that if you just let someone else do the heavy lifting, you're more free to do other deals where you're not spending the time and the energy that sometimes you don't have chasing people down. And one of the things that also I found when I was servicing my own loans, the loans that were paying were so profitable to me that sometimes I forgot about the non-performing loans. This is a true story. We were on the cruise. I don't know if it was this cruise, past cruise, or the previous cruise, but one of the investors, I was standing there watching, and a guy walked up to him. He was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I haven't made a payment on my note in 6 months." He was like, "Oh, really? I didn't even realize it." He didn't even know. So the guy kind of told him that he had not paid on his loan for 6 months, and the investor had no clue. And then he starts going through all of these loans that he had funded. He's like, "Oh, I haven't received a payment on this loan. I haven't received a payment on this loan." I said, "Well, who's doing your servicing?" "Oh, I have a girl that does it for me." I said, "Well, she doesn't sound like she's doing very good." But you know, that was just my opinion. But you add that up to, you know, $3,000–4,000 of income that you were expecting, even if it's in your retirement, you're just letting it go up in smoke. And then the other thing is, you know, the laws are not all the same in every single state. Foreclosure process is different in every single state, and some states it's very, very expensive. And do you know, when you're going in, for example, so we had a foreclosure in Ohio, and I was trying to use a new attorney, and he's like, "Well, I need a $10,000 retainer." I was like, "For what?" I said, "This foreclosure shouldn't be more than $4,500. He's like, "Well, no." I said, "No, thanks." But if you were going in Ohio to foreclose, if you didn't know how much it generally would cost you to foreclose in a state, you would foolishly write a check and wouldn't know any better. So you're not protecting yourself by doing some of these things yourself. I think I asked the question earlier about your letter, was it FDCPA compliant? Any correspondence that you send to a borrower that is attempting to collect a debt, you should have the mini Miranda on it, and I can say it in my sleep: "This is an attempt to collect a debt. Any information obtained will be used for that purpose." And I even put, you know, if I'm talking to them, your call might be monitored for quality and training purposes. You should also put a bankruptcy disclosure on your letters. The bankruptcy disclosure on your letters, basically, if they've been discharged in Chapter 7, you're not pursuing them personally, you're just pursuing the debt that you have, the lien that you have on the property. And I feel like the regulators change the rules every time the wind blows. All those things that I just rattled off to you, Main Street can help you do those things, and we can help you do those things, again, in a way that I think that would help you be very, very successful. We run an automated dialer 3 times a week. We call 3 different times in a day. We have asset managers actually doing a lot of the due diligence that sometimes fall through the cracks when you're trying to do it yourself. We track, we have reminders, we have reporting in place to just help really maintain the loans a lot better than you can do yourself. So, and I may be a little bit ahead of myself because I'm terrible when it comes to slides. I probably shouldn't use any. When you're using a servicer, you can relax. You can be emotional, but the borrower doesn't hear you being emotional. Because I think that consumers are pretty smart, especially sophisticated consumers, are pretty smart, and they will play you like a violin to feel sorry for them. And sometimes they're just professional deadbeats. There are people who really life has happened, and those challenges happen, and we can go through a process to eliminate if it was life or it's just that I'm just trying to play the system. And I'm going to pick on Jeremy in the back of the room. You know, Jeremy and I think we met, about 3 years ago, and sometimes I used to think, man, he's heartless. He is just so hard. No offense. But he's successful. He's really successful on what he does. But I can remember just thinking I would just never want to, you know, run into him with a borrower. And I'm probably telling something I shouldn't tell, but I sold him a note. Was it the beginning of the year, Navarro? Sold him a note at the beginning of the year. So I was selling him my problem that I did not know that my problem was going to come back to me, because the borrower is suing us because Jeremy evicted her after we foreclosed. Had we completed the foreclosure when I sold you the note?
No.
You finished it. So this is even crazier. So right now we're being sued, and I don't think Jeremy has even been served yet by the borrower. Have you been served?
We haven't, but we're going to go ahead and tell them, you know, we're back.
But the thing is that he really doesn't worry. So he's really not a good example about a worrier. But our compliance officer, which is our in-house attorney, is so concerned about this file. And he was like, well, why did you sell it? I said, well, what else was I going to do with it? I said, there was nothing else for us to do with it. So I sold it to somebody who could do something with it. And even though we're a servicer, there's still worries, but it's not your worry. And Jeremy is just kind of, you know, this is just the cost of doing business. And sometimes I look at him and say, if we had a lot more investors that had that mindset and that attitude, we would be better off. But a lot of times you don't have that. You have something that goes wrong. And again, I tell you, people are normally calling me when they want me to fix things when it's already a mess. And sometimes it's too late. So if you originate a loan, and especially if you're doing seller financing, just board it. You know, we'll provide you a checklist of some things that you need to have in place before you actually fund the loan to maybe help you protect yourself a little bit better in your deals.
Saprina?
Yes, sir.
Tell us about your fees. Can you do that?
No, I cannot, because I don't know our fees. But I will. But what I can do is I can provide a pricing sheet. I don't know them off the top of my head. We have
Tell us what your services are.
our services. So we actually, I think I'll go through this in part of my slides, but I mean, we do cradle to grave. From origination to the day you book, we'll actually take over the service transfer at the time of closing. We will also take a loan that maybe you buy a non-performing loan, and we will take it at the state that it's in. One of the things that I will say about us is that part of our fees are a lot lower than the other servicers because we charge a success fee on the back end. So if I board a non-performing loan, don't quote me, you guys. I think for a second it's $50 a month, and a first is maybe $35 for non-performing and performing. But when the loan becomes non-performing, we charge a percentage on the back end, and we don't gouge you with fees. I mean, it's very, very transparent in our pricing sheet. Yes, we do. But what I will also say to you is that at any given time that you are not happy with what I am doing for you or the services you're providing, we actually charge $15 to deboard a loan. Most servicers charge you $100 to $125 to deboard a loan. Why? Because if you have 100 loans with somebody and you have to pay that deboarding fee, what are you going to do? You're going to leave it there because you don't want to write that check. It's simple for me. If you don't like what I'm doing, you don't like how I'm responding, I will tell you that we do reporting, but my reporting looks nothing like FCI. So if you want the bells and whistles, you can pay for the bells and whistles, and that's fine. But I can't give you what FCI gives. But I can give you better service than other servicers give.
Saprina, when you say you'll take it from the beginning, that means taking assignments. What about seller financing originations? Are you guys trying to do the RMLO kind of stuff?
No, it's not. So after you've closed it and a loan officer has actually signed off on it, that's when we would pick it up. And even if, I mean, we've even done a couple contract for deeds that have been a mess. And so I've put some checklists in place for people who are doing seller financing. We'll go through contract for deeds or even loans that are originated. And I think I might have an example in my slides, I don't know, that there was a contract for deed that was originated. There was no interest rate and the loan. There was no late fee. There was no requirement for property insurance. None of this language was in the contract. So we actually had to do an addendum to the contract to get the borrower to sign. And how I did that was I told them that I would forgive them for a month of their payment in order to get them to sign the documents the correct way. And the investor was not very happy with me, but I said, well, how about you wait until they're in default and you try to go to court with this, I won't say what I said, but this not so nice document and see if it stands up. I said, we need to fix it now. And this is the only way that you can motivate some people sometimes is to give them an incentive. And it was an incentive of just missing a payment. I said, I didn't say they didn't have to pay it. I moved it to the back end of the loan. And the borrower didn't even realize that. So they didn't read what I sent them. But I told them, I said, you can miss a payment in order to sign this contract. You'll get the money later. You don't have to get it now.
Will you board a loan that wasn't underwritten by an MLO?
Yes, we will.
What is your definition and of what you guys are saying in the industry of how, who needs to use an MLO or who just doesn't qualify or fall under the loan originator things?
So once you get to probably 5 to 10 loans, our in-house counsel will say no.
Per year or just
per year.
total?
Per year.
Per year. So you can do up to 5 because, a regular mom and pop, they're only usually doing one of these. They don't really qualify, not that you don't want them to have a good note, but so, but a lot of investors are in here going, I want to do a bunch of these. I want to buy at this price, do owner carry and have the note. I mean, that's business. So it's a different category.
But Watchtower is actually doing a lot of underwriting for mom and pop shops, and they're charging about $500 a loan, which is cheaper than some of the other people that actually have been doing it. And Watchtower, I think, is licensed all over.
And they charge the borrower, not us.
Well, it depends on the investor. Because I have an investor that's probably doing about 20 to 25 a month, and he pays for them. So, but Watchtower will, they will bill the borrower, which again, just my personal opinion, work it into the loan somehow and don't make the borrower pay for it.
Well, that's what I meant. It's in the loan. It's not out of our pocket.
Right. But roll it in a way that the borrower can't see it, because I'm telling you, the things that I see, getting a little bit off topic, because I do some seller financing myself, things that kill the deal is the fees up front that the borrower looks like, like I can't afford this. It just scares them. It's sticker shock. So I figure out another way to make sure that it's in there. They just don't see it. The bottom line is that as long as you know what your return on your investment is that's all that matters. We have decades of experience and a lot of success stories.
Are you moving on to a different topic? Can I use you to finish off this? This is something that came up, the compliance aspect that you covered a lot. Is there anything more you can say about licensing? You guys have been in the business of non-performing. That's why you had to service your own notes anyway. Now go, well, we've got this whole thing in place. We're going to serve other people's notes. How many states do you have to have? Because there's a lot of servicers out there, frankly, they don't have the licensing technically, but maybe there's some states that you don't have to have a license to service. So so I can't name them by states, but there are some states that you just have to be registered to do business in to service a loan. There are some states that require you to, it's the bonding. Some states you have to be registered in the
and MLS system. There's other states that you have to be registered with the Bankers Association. So it just all depends on the state. But I will tell you that there are some states that go for the jugular when you are doing business in their states as a servicer and you're not licensed or you're not registered to do business with them. I'm sorry?
Nevada's one of them?
Nevada, Massachusetts, Washington, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. No, Arizona is not on the list of, I would say, of the headhunters going in for the jugular. But those are just a few states that I can say off the top of my head. The state of Washington went through this thing where if you actually just filed an NOD, you were getting a letter from the Attorney General. And then they went to even watching even more if you recorded an assignment in a couple of counties. They were coming after you, wanting to know why you were doing business in their state and you weren't registered. So Georgia is the biggest one that will give you a cease and desist order immediately. They'll give you a cease and desist order to do business in the state. So I would just be very, very careful and just those states that I make mention of. I will tell you guys that the paperwork is horrific in reference to the licensing process. And even using a company, we used Cornerstone and we're still using Cornerstone for our license. And it has been a nightmare. It is almost like a full-time job babysitting them, getting things done to make sure that you're actually responding and answering questions to those particular states to get back whatever you need to return to make sure that all the money you've already spent doesn't go down the drain. Because if you don't respond in a timely manner, you have to start over. And that's no fun. And the bonds are so expensive in some states. And in some states, you also have to have a lockbox. Some states, you have to have a registered agent. It goes on and on and on. And I don't know if that's me being too vague on answering the question, but that's the best way I feel like I can answer the question in reference to licensing. And, you know, when you get a letter from the Attorney General or you get an inquiry from the CFPB, how do you respond? Do you even know how to respond? Because you may have not done anything wrong other than a consumer feeling like you did something wrong. And you don't have that backing. And the attorney fees are horrific. I mean, even with us, I mean, I think the case that I was talking to you guys about with Jeremy about, we're paying a lawyer $350 an hour, and I feel like they've done nothing. And I just had to sign off on a bill for $5,700. And I was like, well, what did you do? I mean, like $500 to review the complaint that came in. Give me a break. You know, but that's the cost of doing business, and it's just my opinion, and I still kind of get into my personal feelings sometimes because I just think some of it's overrated.
Is there anything else on licensing compliance? Because this is the time to get it out on servicing, on notes, on Dodd-Frank, on...
Go ahead.
The license to originate the loans. Let's say I want to do seller financing and I'm going to use an RMLO. Can I do as many of those each year as I want? Do I need a license to do that?
No, you don't. If you use a loan officer, no, you do not. But again, depending on how you service it, it's another beast in what states you're originating in. So on the origination side, you're fine. But then what are you going to do once the loan becomes when you originate it? And then what happens when the loan goes into default? Even though you probably have some upfront processes to hope that the loan doesn't go into default, are you making sure that you're protecting the back end of your investment? Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about pricing, the other elephant in the room. And I think that just ignorance of people have driven the prices up. And that is it in a nutshell. You know, you have people who don't know any better spending way, way, way too much money on loans. And I think one of the last trades that Freddie and Fannie did, it was a Florida pool, and it was a very large pool. This pool closed at 87 cents on the dollar. How in the world can we make money at 87 cents on the dollar? And these were all first lien positions, and they were all Florida loans. Luckily, it went to a nonprofit, so they can just milk the government some more. But there's no way in our industry can we afford to pay those prices for loans and actually be successful. They were non-performing. They were non-performing. And they said that they're solid paper. I said, I don't care if they were written on toilet paper, not at that price.
They probably got some grants though, or something.
So the benefit of a nonprofit purchasing them is that they get kickbacks for every loan that they actually get performing. NeighborWorks of America, Neighborhood Housing, just to name a few. They have programs that the nonprofit is incentivized, given incentives for, in order to get those homeowners back on track. So some of the factors that we look at in pricing, first mortgages with equity, you're going to just pay more. And then if you're buying a first lien position, one of the things that I tell people to look at, everybody's talking about, well, the UPB is this. Well, what's the value? What's the value of the asset? Stop treating people like they're stupid. You get these people, I say the dog and pony shows, hyping up non-performing loans and make people who have no idea think that they're getting a gold mine, and they're not, just because. So what, you're purchasing UPB, you probably aren't going to collect it, you're going to forgive it. So when you're buying, make sure you know what you're buying, and buy based off the value of the asset and not the UPB. Seconds with equity is just another ridiculous conversation. People are paying 40, 50 cents on the dollar for second lien positions with equity in some states. And it's sad because it's just driving the cost of the paper up. Second liens underwater, they're still high right now. I had to really put a filter on when I started, being in a place where I'm responsible for selling loans, because I still have my own personal opinions about what I think something should sell for. Yes, emotional equity is great, but emotional equity will also make a borrower file bankruptcy. Jeremy reminded me of that today. And then second liens behind a performing first are a little more valuable. And especially, they're really valuable when they have a great mod in place with the first. And you're going to make a whole lot of money, but they don't tell you about the waiting game. They don't tell you that you're going to probably be in your investment a minimum of 2 years a lot of times, sometimes 3 years, maybe even 4, before you see a real pop if you do a large purchase. So we had an investor that had been into his portfolio for about 2 years, and he decided he wanted to sell all of his seconds. So we sold his seconds to an investor. I think they're out of New York. So we sold this loan for $20,000. The property was located in Brooklyn, New York, and we negotiated a settlement with the borrower. 3 months, this second sold for $60,000. The borrower was out of the country, and we encouraged him to put it on auction.com, and the first lien holder agreed to allow the property to go on auction.com. It sold, and borrower had a credit score of 649. If it had been an owner OC, I would have probably tried to push for a refi to get more money, but sometimes you have to just know when to give. The borrower even walked away with $10,000 cash from this short sale. But the buyer of this note had held on to this note for 3 months before they actually made $40,000. Not bad, not bad at all. And if the previous owner had just held tight just a little bit longer, they would have reaped the benefits of that, but they had just got tired of waiting, and they just did not see light at the end of the tunnel, and they wanted out. And we got them out at a price where they made a little bit of a profit, but they could have made a greater profit, I think, if they'd have just stayed in just probably a year longer. Oh, that's really bad. That actually was a HUD from the closing, but it's not showing up very well, and I don't know why.
The contrast is changed during the
Oh. Okay. Go ahead.
What's the best way when you're boarding a new loan, like if I'm buying a note and you're servicing for me?
Mm-hmm.
But like, is there like due diligence checklists for what we should be looking for to make sure it's a solid note?
Is it a non-performing loan?
No, I'm just saying in general. Like, I mean, like, how do we know, like, what's kind of our due diligence? I mean, I'm sure we're gonna maybe go over that due diligence on.
So when you're buying a loan, the things that you need to take into consideration, you need to know if the property is occupied or vacant. You need to check property taxes to make sure they're current or delinquent. If you're buying a second, you need to know the status of the first, if it's performing or non-performing. You need to check bankruptcy to make sure that the borrower is not in an active Chapter 13 or Chapter 7. Go ahead.
Services do all this? I mean, do you have a service that?
No, we don't provide that. We do once we board, but we don't provide that service to help somebody buy a loan.
So when we're doing our due diligence, like if we want to check the status of the first, are we given some authorization? I mean,
No. Mm-mm.
How do we check this? Are we pulling a credit report?
So that's okay. So when you're buying, if you're buying, I normally ask if the seller if they have a credit report. I don't like to pull credit because depending on how you pull, we do soft pulls, so we don't show up on the bureau, but everybody doesn't have that ability to do a soft pull. So if you do a soft pull, you don't do a soft pull and you pull somebody's credit and you didn't buy that loan and then they complain, if you have the right to pull credit, now you violated FCRA, and you can actually lose your right to be able to pull a credit report. So we actually just ask for copy of the credit report. We also will look at if we can see the origination docs, if it was an 80-20 loan, who the original creditor was, and from a Google Voice phone, make sure you take this out the recording. I will actually call in and verify the status of the first. If I have the key information, and if they're current, generally it'll just come up on an automated line. If it's not current, generally you get transferred to a live agent, and then you probably should disconnect the call because you don't want to misrepresent yourself as the borrower. But if you're being transferred to a live agent, generally that's a key indicator that the first is delinquent.
Good information, thank you.
Yeah, how about, for people that, do large volume, what are you guys doing for BPOs and appraisals, like, in all these places across the country? Kathy gave us your Black Knight one, I forget, what was that website?
Citex. It's called Black Knight, but you go to Citex Pro.
So, anyway,
So we use I don't know the name of our vendor.
Use RealtyTrack. If you get a RealtyTrack.com subscription, you go, you pop the property address in, it tells you all the loans that are active, it tells you if the loans are paid off, it gives you loan numbers. It won't give you the current balance, but you can work backwards. It also gives you comps, it gives you properties for listing, sexual offenders in the area. I mean, it gives you everything. So and it's a subscription you pay annually.
And also, First American also provides a similar service as that as well, and it's a membership.
Yeah, I guess my concern is if I'm buying a note and it wasn't originated correctly, I mean, I'm taking on the risk.
But you have to look at the note. Request a digital copy of the collateral before you actually fund. And what you're looking for is you're looking to make sure that there was a loan application collected, income docs were collected. You're looking to make sure that there's an interest rate, there's a copy of the note, there's a copy of the mortgage or deed of trust. Make sure that there's late fees involved in that. Make sure that there's a maturity date. Make sure that if it's an interest-only loan, if there's a balloon on the back end, when is that balloon going to mature? Make sure those are the things that you have to look for if you're going to buy a loan. You can't buy it based off of somebody's word. You have to actually be able to look at the documents, trust but verify. Some of this stuff that I've already I've already gone over, and also make sure that that there's still a valid lien on the property when you're actually buying a note. You know, I was sharing a story about somebody had purchased some loans, and they were deed of trust. No, they weren't. I'm sorry, they were land contracts, contract for deeds. They weren't recorded in Florida. Somebody used all their IRA money, had them boarded with FCI. FCI said they'd go ahead and board the loans, and through the process found out that the loans were unsecured because they had been lost at tax sale. That's why it's so important that you make sure that you are verifying that property taxes are current. And when you're calling to verify property taxes are current, you need to ask the question, has there been any taxes sold to a third party? That is a key question. So you call or you look up online to see if taxes are current and they show that they're current. That doesn't always mean that they're current. You need to call to verify to make sure that taxes have not been sold.
Just as a big picture thing, I assume we're mainly talking about consumer loans, owner-occ. Are there states in which, you know, all of this Yahoo applies to business purpose loans that are not owner-occupant related?
Well, even if it's an investment property, some things still will apply.
In all states or just some states?
Just some states, but there's some of the general stuff will still apply. Not the, I would say the investment property. I still would collect a lot of the information that I would require from a consumer until you know that person that you're doing business with. I would grab that information that I'm telling you to grab, even if you're doing a consumer loan.
May I ask, isn't it 1 to 4 family? Anything above 1 to 4, then it's frankly kind of rolls off.
Yeah, they roll off.
Even if it's non-owner occupied 1 to 4, you're still done.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so in Nevada, because I'm a Nevada broker and mortgage broker in California, there's huge differences. I just got audited in Nevada. Nevada, if it's a residential property, it's a residential loan, no matter what. California is completely different. California, if it's a business purpose loan and there's no consumer intention, it's a business purpose loan. They did not look at it the same way in Nevada at all. So it's like state by state, it's so different. That's why like Nevada's like way harder, I think, personally, than California in that capacity.
You also need to know if you're buying a first or a second mortgage. So make sure that the language is clear in your note and your mortgage or deed of trust. Make sure you know what lien position you're buying. You know, sometimes in the second space, you look out, you think you're buying a second, you get a first. That's a home run. That's great, but don't let it be reversed. Don't buy a first. You think it's a first, and it's really a second or a third.
How would you know that it's a first or second?
Well, the language would say, but I would recommend pulling title. If you don't know how to go to the county records to check yourself, pull title. Spend that extra $150 to make sure what lien position you're buying. Yes?
I just want to mention my Fright Night story for this year has involved a...
Can't hear you, Clint. Stand up.
Sorry. My Fright Night story... Okay, sorry. We always had Fright Night at Quest, and my Fright Night story for this year includes a situation where I originated a loan some years ago, and for various reasons, which are really not very smart at this point in looking back. I originated a loan some years ago, and for various reasons, I kept letting the loan get extended and extended and extended, and the guy kept paying his taxes by borrowing money from a tax lien lender. So my first lien loan became a second and then a third lien loan, effectively because of the sales of property tax liens in Texas are priority over the mortgages even then. So just you got to know your due diligence, and if you didn't know that Genesis Loan Servicing or whatever was a tax lien lender, you might have assumed that that was in fact first, because it was a first when it was made. It just became later a second by virtue of these tax lien loans. So I've just wanted to give that word of warning there.
And also, any pending lawsuits against the borrower, you need to know about if one of your exit strategies is going to be a deed in lieu. Because if there's been a judgment put against the borrower, it will kind of stop you in your deed in lieu process unless you're willing to, assume whatever that judgment is against the borrower. And this is some stuff that I've already covered. One of the things that I will talk about, real true story. We had just purchased a large pool of loans in the end of May. We did the purchase and sale agreement. We closed the beginning of June. Service transfer was probably June 26th. And one of the properties actually was involved in a fire on the 21st of June. Total loss, and the initial investment was about $70,000. And I said to the seller, "Do you have first place insurance?" They said yes. Somebody else said no. So I had to start digging, and because I still have friends at FCI, I was able to call to find out that there truly was first place insurance on the property, but the seller really did not even have a clue. And the only reason the first place insurance was on the property was because it was part of the contract, their boarding contract with FCI. So be sure to know that if you're buying a first, if there's first place insurance in place on those properties, and you also need to know if the properties are vacant or occupied. In this particular house, it was squatters getting high, and they ended up catching the house on fire. It was really, really sad because there was also children in that home. And again, it just isn't always about the money for me. I wanted to make sure that those kids were okay. And so I started doing a little bit more digging to make sure that they had a place to go, even though they were squatting.
That makes them pretty flexible though, right? Like at the yoga stretch.
Yes. And also one of the other things is that verify where the foreclosure is, if a foreclosure has already started on a loan that you're purchasing, for two reasons. You don't want to pay for something somebody else has already paid for, and also I do the date of transfer when I assume responsibility for any legal fees. So I will actually sign a new engagement letter for that date, and if they did something during service transfer or before my engagement letter is signed, I am not paying them. Fire me, I don't care. You don't move forward on a loan that belongs to me without having permission. Don't get a bunch of fees and think I'm going to pay you and you didn't have my permission to do so. So I think that it's very important to know where the foreclosure is and how much has been advanced by the previous owner of the loan.
I have heard that if one entity starts a foreclosure and then you buy it mid-foreclosure, someone told me on one thing that they had to start, in some state, they had to start over, that you couldn't take an assignment of something and
So,
keep that original timeline going. Is that correct?
no, we just file a motion for substitute of plaintiff in the foreclosure, and we don't run into a problem with that. This is really bad. So, things that we need if you're going to board loans with us, we need a complete assignment chain, a copy of all the allonges as well, and you can see an allonge two different ways. Allonge is a piece of paper that just gives you the right to actually collect that payment, or you'll see an endorsement stamp. And sometimes on a lot of the loan documents, you'll see 2 to 3 endorsement stamps, and then you'll start seeing a chain of allonges that will go with that. We need a copy of the original note, the promissory note, deed of trust or mortgage, and if there have been any forbearance agreements or modifications done with the previous note owner, we would ask for a copy of those too. One of the things that's really, really important in reference to the forbearance agreements or the loan mods is when you are boarding your loans and you're trying to set up the new terms, if something actually is missing and the borrower doesn't have a copy, the seller is a flake and you can't get a hold of them, if you don't have all that documentation, it's really, really hard to actually get a loan boarded. And a couple of servicers will reject servicing because all the paperwork is not in place. And sometimes they'll have it for a while, even after service transfer is complete, and they'll still reject servicing. We really try to work with our investors when they're boarding loans with us and try to make sure that you know what we need up front prior to saying that we're not going to take your loan because the loan package is incomplete. And don't hold me to it. If we find something that's wrong, we try to correct it early on, and we make you aware of it. And it's a teaching, it's a time to teach you not to do it again, but we just don't reject the loan because something was wrong in the package. But we do bring it to your attention. So I already talked about this story in reference to the investor who boarded along with us that was missing all of this stuff. But it gets even crazier. The one part that I forgot, she had been named as a mortgagee, the mortgagee clause on the homeowner's insurance. And she got a copy of the homeowner's insurance, and she didn't like it because this was her IRA money. And she called the insurance company and she changed the property insurance. I said, you can't do that. And she said, yes, I can. I said, see, I said, you're too involved. I said, this is your retirement money. You cannot do that. I said, I could not do that as the bank. You can't do it because you loan money. But changed it, increased the premium and the coverage on the property because she wanted to make sure that if something happened, there was enough coverage on the property. Again, just emotionally involved. And that's just no. It's just sometimes I throw things in my office a lot. And the other thing is that a lot of us, we have the tendency to share documents. Quincy, thank you for making all of my Ohio paperwork so much easier when I was a resident of Ohio. But what I did was I took all of my paperwork that I got from Quincy and I took it to an Ohio attorney to make it Ohio compliant. I listen very well. But when you're getting a document from someone to use, whether it's a contract, purchase and sale agreement, whether it's a note, whether it's a deed of trust, whether it's a mortgage, have an attorney in that state look over those documents. Because if you don't, it just gets messy. And if we have to foreclose and there's language that is required in a particular state and it's not in there, you're going to get your case thrown out. And so we'll just, have to keep on calling the borrower and hope they answer the phone or show up at their door and do a door knock. One of the things about when you're getting into note investing, begin with the end in mind. Think about how you're going to actually exit out of your deal and what's going to work for you. Some people, they keep the loan to full term, and people with retirement accounts, that's pretty sweet if they're performing loans. You can sell the loan after it's performing, and you can sell it, one of two ways. You can sell it as the entire loan, or you can sell a partial. You can sell the front end. You can settle with the homeowner at a discounted rate. You can foreclose. something like I said, that is never, ever what I want to do, but sometimes you just have to do it, and it's the last resort. You can do a deed in lieu of foreclosure, and you can do a loan mod or a forbearance agreement. And again, this is really, really bad. So here's my last case study. Making a loan perform again. We paid $35,000 for this loan. I love this story. This was an older couple getting divorced because their finances had gone cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And the phones were ringing one day, and I picked up the phone, and the wife is crying. I'm not above doing anything, and if the phone's ringing and there's somebody to answer it, I'm going to pick up the phone. She said she was leaving. She didn't know about the second mortgage. And I was like, well, let us see if we can help you. Property was set to go to foreclosure, and this was by the 1st. No, I'm sorry, it wasn't the 1st. It was us. That's why she called crying, because it was us foreclosing. We did an awesome forbearance agreement with her. We didn't forgive any of the balance on her loan. So $75,000 we had, that's what they owed us. And it was a first lien. And what we ended up doing was putting them in a payment plan. They had to pay back all the legal expenses. They didn't have money to put down, I don't think. We gave them a second chance, and we did 204 months, a 4% interest rate, first lien position, $454 a month, and they were happy. And she actually, her husband called me. He says, we're not getting a divorce because you were able to help us save our home. This was the last thing that we had to keep us together. And when we felt like we were going to lose it, we were just ready to throw in the towel. And we were able to turn a non-performing loan. And I think this loan, we bought it in June. So it's now, October? They've already made 2 payments on the loan, and I don't think they'll ever be late again because it's a payment that they can afford. They hit hard times. He's still working, middle-aged couple. I think that's what the business should be about, is helping people recover. And I didn't want the house anyways. It had a ton of repairs that needed to be done. After I got a copy of the interior appraisal, I said, oh my goodness, who took this to sale? I didn't start the foreclosure because I probably would have never started the foreclosure. But that is really all that I have. And just so you guys know, I cannot, because of my position, I cannot do any consulting anymore. So what I do, I know Don is actually supporting the Boys and Girls Club, but if for some reason you need 2 hours of my time or more, I actually have a nonprofit organization that I support in Nevada called NOW, No Opportunity Wasted. It's actually given disadvantaged children in this city of Reno, Sparks, and surrounding areas an opportunity to go to a historically black college. Probably a lot of these students are first-time children that would ever see a university. I negotiate their scholarships with these universities. And that's kind of where I'm at. That's the website. I'm on the board of NOW, and that's what I've been doing to actually give back to people who actually still need some help and that I can't charge for anymore. So just in an exchange, I just say off the record, you donate to NOW, you have my time.
That's excellent. All right, am I mic'd up? Can you hear me?
We have a question, Don?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, it's a nonprofit. We are a nonprofit organization. 501. Yes, it's a 501. It's a typo. It's a 501. It's a typo. No. But does anybody have any?
In your modification on
Mhm.
How many years was that for?
It was 240 months. 204.
So you would get your yield in purchasing of the non-performing notes.
So actually what the plan is actually to season that loan for 6 months to a year and to sell it off to an investor at a 10% return.
Well, Dean's making the point that if you had 75,000, you bought it down here at 50 or 40, and so or 35. So 4% is really what's really the yield on that?
I don't know how my
But like really high, right?
Yeah. So that's my intention. But sometimes because that particular investor that bought that loan, he bought it in a retirement account, he'll probably hold on to it and it won't matter. But if for some reason I need to make him liquid to be able to do some more deals for him, I'll actually sell that loan off as a reperforming loan, like I said, in 6 months to a year. And we collected all of the required documents. So I actually collected bank statements, I collected income docs, retirement account information. I made sure that they weren't a bankruptcy risk. We pulled their credit. We got interior photos. And one step even better that I did not have to do, because of their income, they actually qualified for a local grant for home repairs. And I helped them actually apply for that to actually get their home repaired.
Nice.
Yes.
So when you're doing your workouts, if circumstances change, and do you bring in another an RMLO, or once they're already in, you can do a workout, like, because let's say like the husband left and she's left there and she's the only form of income now. I mean, do we have to look at that? I mean, as far as like Dodd-Frank BS? So
we look at it, but so the reason why I collect all those documents, I actually have a worksheet internally that we use to make sure that we are not putting them 50%, over 50% DTI. Whether they're single, whether they're married, I try not to put them over 50% DTI to make sure that they have a cushion. So I feel like if I ever had to go in front of a judge about what I did to a homeowner or a consumer, that I basically acted in their best interest. I don't bring in a loan officer to underwrite that. I have my own underwriting experience to make me feel comfortable with the decisions that we're making. Now, the bad thing is that sometimes when I present those options to a greedy investor, they don't always like it. They want a higher payment. I'm like, but they can't afford a higher payment. I don't care that they haven't made their mortgage payment in 4 years. I care, but I don't care. Right now, we have them at the table in a place where they're able to put a down payment down, able to make monthly payments. Do you want it or not? And if they say no, and I have to complete foreclosure, it puts a sour taste in my mouth. And just like I tell you, you can walk away from me for $15 a month. I mean, at one time, I have fired investors. I don't want to do business with you. I want to be able to sleep at night.
Yeah.
All right, excellent, fantastic. All right, so we've covered this. I'm trying to mark these things off. I'm going to consider that done, some non-performing notes, and we talked a lot about collateral file. So